And so I was interested. I went over and spoke to him, and he gave me, I bought from him a package of incense, which is what I was mostly interested in actually. But I also bought one pamphlet, Krishna Reservoir of Pleasure. How many of you read that? Skinny little pamphlet. It's still extant. You can still get it. I know because I'm the one who does all the printing for BBT North America. So we still have that in print. Skinny little pamphlet based on lectures on nectar devotion. But it's so powerful. I'll never forget the very first sentence. Prabhu says, Krishna, that name is transcendental. Krishna means the highest pleasure. Every one of us is looking for pleasure. Yeah? Are you looking for pleasure? But we don't know where to go. So that didn't go because, like I said, I was more a pleasure seeker. Engineering, that was secondary. First thing was seeking pleasure. So when Prabhupada wrote that, and I read that, it immediately attracted my mind, and I sought out the temple in New York. So the first day I went, it was like midweek, if I remember correctly. It was like a Wednesday, and middle of the day. So the devotees were all either engaged in the temple or they were all doing something. And so one devotee met me at the door. He said, there's somebody available to speak with you right now. Can you just wait in this room? So they had a room, maybe half the size of this one. Maybe a little bigger, but big paintings like those. Big paintings on the wall. And the one that attracted me the most was, if you've read the Bhagavatam, you must have seen this painting. It's a huge painting of the Garbhodakshay Vishnu lying on his serpent bed, Seshanag, and the fires of devastation coming out of his mouth. So I was like, I was raised in a Christian household. I never, I should say, frankly, sold my soul to that path because so many things didn't make sense. So I used to actually argue with my mother a lot. So much so that when I was about 10 years old, she said, look, this is my chosen path. If it doesn't work for you, find your own. In other words, leave me alone. So I did. I mean, by then I was already reading all kinds of stuff. My mother was a school teacher, so I learned to read very early in life. By age 4, I was reading fluently. And in those days, I was born in 1952, there was no internet, barely. We just got television. We could watch like 1 hour a night. So there was nothing to distract your mind except books. Books and playing with your friends. And like I said, my mother was a teacher. My father was a businessman. So his contribution to my development was to always have the latest version of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Because if you wanted to know something, you couldn't just Google it. You had to look it up. Encyclopedia or go to the library. So I remember clearly one night must have been 5 at that time. And this is before we came to the United States. I was born in Jamaica, the island of Jamaica. And in those days in Jamaica, on a dark moon night, very little light pollution in the city, you could really see the universe. I don't know if you've ever been to a mountaintop where there's no light. You can really see all those constellations and galaxies out there. And I remember as a child thinking, where do I fit into this? It's obvious you can't feel very big compared to what's out there. If you're a little bit intelligent. Nowadays, people are not so intelligent. Everybody's puffed up. Like there's a saying in English, every pauper is proud of his penny. So nowadays people are falsely puffed up. A little education or a little money in the bank or a little bit of decent looks in there, puffed up. But again, if you're a little intelligent and you look what's out there, how can you feel puffed up? Just the opposite, you feel like that. So anyway, like I said, I used to argue with my mother. So when I came across Papa's books and the explanation, because one question I always asked my mother, she couldn't answer to my satisfaction. I said, it's stated in the Christian Bible that God is fair and God is just. So if God is fair and God is just, how come there's so much disparity in the world? I mean, even as a child, I could see that. In our own family. My mother's from a family of 8. Her older brother dropped out of medical school and became a millionaire many times over in real estate. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, her second to youngest sister married, I don't want to use any harsh words, but she married a bum. Couldn't keep a job, so she was like practically raising 2 kids by herself, working, raising 2 kids because the guy just, was a drunk. So in one family, that disparity, millionaire on one side, hardly can get anything to eat on the other side. So she couldn't explain to my side. So she said, go to the minister. And I did. I went to the minister and asked, same question. He said, well, God works in mysterious ways. What does that mean? In other words, the Christians, as far as my experience, they don't have any clear conception of why things are the way they are. So until I came across Prabhupada's books and read about karma, clearly what karma means, because I'd heard the word, but until you hear a clear explanation, first of all, you have to accept eternality. Because if you're not eternal, just like Prabhupada said in his own life in Scottish Church College in Calcutta, this Professor Urquhart, he said, you Hindus believe in karma, but who is the witness? Where is the witness to my so-called deeds from another life? And Prabhupada said at the time he couldn't answer, but later on when he came to 6th canto, if you've read 6th canto, 1st chapter, Ajamil Leela, it's clearly explained that for everything you're doing, there are so many witnesses. All the demigods practically, sky, sun, moon, air. So there's nothing you can do that is hidden. And ultimately the super soul is there witnessing everything. So again, Prabhupada's philosophy presented by Prabhupada is what attracted me to Krishna consciousness. And I stayed because 2 other components, prasadam and devotee association. Such nice devotees. Where I joined in Henry Street in 73, a lot of those devotees are still very active. Amazing from that temple, that time. Amazing how many serious, like Jayadvaita Maharaj, he's the one who got me involved in the book publishing, because as part of my engineering study, I learned how to program computers. But computers in those days meant mainframe. A computer the size of this room that doesn't have as much computing power as your iPhone. But that was state of the art in those days. So I learned how to program computers. So one day I'm doing my seva in the temple, and he came to me and said, I wasn't even initiated yet. This is like early 74. He said, we've heard, would you like to get involved in producing Prabhupada's books? I said, of course. He said, you know why I'm asking? I said, no. He said, because we've heard that you know how to program computers, and we're getting ready to computerize Prabhupada's book production. So the next generation of computers after mainframe, they were called mini computers. They were the size of a refrigerator. So that was then the state of the art. So I learned how to program. I have pictures. If I could have brought my computer, I could show you. Anyway, there are many pictures of me programming that computer. How many of you have seen Brilliant as the Sun? There's a nice little movie made by Yadavar Prabhu called Brilliant as the Sun. If you've never seen it, go on YouTube and just Google, you'll find it. So what he did was he made a film showing the entire scheme of Prabhupada's book production. So it begins with Srila Prabhupada dictating into the dictaphone, and he stops every few seconds, so you hear the click, 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 and then it's recorded on a huge reel-to-reel tape. And then after Prabhupada is recorded, that tape is sent to a transcriber. So again, he's showing the whole process. So one devotee is sitting there with headphones on, listening on another reel-to-reel. He's listening to Prabhupada's translation, and he types. Now, as young American devotees, many of us didn't quite understand Prabhupada's accent. So quite a few mistakes were made in transcription. Now, I would be lying if I told you they were all caught. By now, even till now, they're still finding mistakes here and there. And that's why some devotees get angry. Why are they still changing? They're not changing Prabhupada's books. Prabhupada wanted his books edited to such a standard that scholars like these guys who were just here would be attracted to Prabhupada's books. That was, and Prabhupada started the editing process. Sometimes people think that we forced Prabhupada to edit his books. No. The editing process started even before ISKCON started. Prabhupada met one young man, he was in his 20s already, Howard Wheeler, who later on became High Agreement. So Prabhupada said, "So, what do you do?" He said, "Oh, I'm an English professor." So Prabhupada said, "Oh, can you do some service for me? Can you type and edit?" So then he started it. He gave him his manuscripts to type and to edit. So anyway, if you watch that movie, Brilliant as the Sun, so after the, and I'll give you an example of how we were mishearing. Once on a morning walk, and I was fortunate to only go on one morning walk with Prabhupada. So on a morning walk, one devotee was getting too near to, because everybody wanted to hear. So from behind, this devotee stepped on Prabhupada's heel. So Prabhupada looked. He didn't say anything, kept walking. A second time he did it. So Prabhupada said very clearly, if you understand Prabhupada's accent, "Don't come near." Don't come near. Now the transcriber, if you listen to that tape, it's still available. He heard, "Don't come here." That's not what Prabhupada said. So those transcribed, typewritten papers had to be edited. So in the beginning it was Ram Rai Ram was his name. And then after that, Hayagriva himself was doing some editing. And finally, Jayadvaita became the editor. So he would notice things were wrong. He would go back to Prabhupada and said, "Prabhupada, you know this." And Prabhupada said, "Yes, yes." So finally, one time, Prabhupada said, "Jayadvaita is done. It's okay. You don't have to show me." He had so much trust in Jayadvaita. So I'm telling you all this because you're young devotees and you'll hear all changes and this and that. Yes, now one may argue that there are some things he edited that maybe could have left. This is after Prabhupada had gone. He made the second edition of the Bhagavad Gita. However, what a lot of devotees don't know is that he showed all of his edits to the GBC. Every one of them. And then later on, some of them got upset. Why was this change? And he told them, "I sent it to you." And they had to admit they were too busy to read what he said. So in other words, they didn't take their responsibility seriously. But the point I'm making is that it's not a conspiracy where Prabhupada's original books were. No, all of those original books are still there. The Macmillan Gita you can buy, it's still available. So if somebody prefers to read that, that's okay. Nobody's going to tell you no. That's what made us devotees, those older versions of the Bhagavad Gita. But it doesn't mean that the newer edited version is not good or some conspiracy. That's also making lots of devotees. Most of you came by reading the newer version of the Bhagavad Gita. So the choice is there. And ISKCON is not the only organization where this has happened. Some of you may know the organization called Self-Realization Fellowship, SRF. So when their leader passed away, two camps arose. One who didn't want to edit his writing, and another camp that wanted to edit the writing and did edit. So the whole thing wound up in court. And the courts said both can exist. See? One side was trying to stamp out the other side. So don't get involved with that. Your business, as Prabhupada said in this morning's purport that we read, the only business of human life is to love Krishna. So if your love for Krishna is awakened more by reading the original version, fine. If somebody else feels more attracted by reading the edited version, so. All right, so tonight we're just going to read one verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Srila Prabhupada cited many verses over and over again. So one of his favorites that he cited over and over again, did I bring my glasses? Is 327. Everybody should know that by heart already. If you don't, this is your homework. Study this verse tonight. And how do you learn slokas? How do you learn? Repetition. Prophet said many times, repetition is the mother of learning, and we all know that. How did you learn your multiplication tables? How did you learn the alphabet? Just by repeating, repeating, repeating. So if you don't take the time to repeat the Gita shlokas, it's going to be hard to learn them. So take the time to repeat. So 327, again, Prophet recited this verse many, many times. Prakriti Kriyamana Ani Gunai Karmani Sarvasya. So let's find next one. Can you put it on the screen or not? It's all right if you can't. And it's a short purport. You should be able to repeat even if you can't see it. Prakrite Kriyamanani Gunai Karmani Sarvashaha Ahankara Vimudatma Karta Hamiti Manyate. So you're all brilliant. You all know it already. So since we're running a little late, we'll just jump to the translation and Srila Prabhupada's purport. So the translation: the spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. Please repeat. The spirit soul, bewildered by the influence of false ego, thinks himself the doer of activities that are in actuality carried out by the three modes of material nature. So Prabhupada is very, very short purport for this verse. Two persons, one in Krishna consciousness and the other in material consciousness, working on the same level may appear to be working on the same platform, but there's a wide gulf of difference in their respective positions. The person in material consciousness is convinced by false ego that he is the doer of everything. He does not know that the mechanism of the body is produced by material nature, which works under the supervision of the Supreme Lord. The materialistic person has no knowledge that ultimately he is under the control of Krishna. Excuse me. The person in false ego takes all credit for doing everything independently, and that is the symptom of his nescience. He does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna in Krishna consciousness. The ignorant man forgets that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is known as Hrishikesh, or the master of the senses of the material body, or due to his long misuse of the senses in sense gratification, he is factually bewildered by the false ego, which makes him forget his eternal relationship with Krishna. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nivashesha Shunyavani Pashtati Vishnarane Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishang Sapatang Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaya Dadati Swapadantika. So yeah, this is a verse that you must know. I was fortunate. Shortly after I joined in New York, Prabhupada came to New York, and the very first verse I heard him lecture on was chapter 2, text 13, another verse that you must know. Extra samosa for anybody who knows that. Dehi no spin, yes. Again, this is the beginning, even before that, because Krishna wanted to remind his cousin brother Arjuna that you don't really know anything. So what did he tell him? Asocial, unvasosastam. Atasum, agatasum, nanasum. Yes. You're speaking learned words, but you're mourning over that which is not worthy of being mourned over. No wise person mourns for the living or the dead. It doesn't mean that devotees, pure devotees, don't feel, that they don't have feeling. But they are able to distinguish between matter and spirit. Prabhupada one later on in the Gita, I forget exactly which purport. It's been a while since I looked at it, but there's one purport, I think in the 9th chapter, where Prabhupada defines intelligence means the ability to distinguish between matter and spirit and to know the controller of both. Because a lot of people talk spiritual, spiritual, but they have no idea what they're talking about. So again, this is what attracted me to this philosophy, this particular path, the clarity of the presentation. Everything is clear. You accept or not accept, that's up to you. Just like today at AAR, the devotee, young devotee who's assisting me this year, Prabhu Vishnu Das, he's a disciple of Kadamba Kanana Maharaj. So one professor came and he said, well, you know, this tradition is all about the spirit, and he started getting into it with her, and you can see she didn't accept. Because they're all scholars. Almost 99% of the people who come to that show, they have PhD or they're working on PhD. But that doesn't mean they know anything. Because if you don't know, if you can't distinguish between matter and spirit and understand the controller of both, your knowledge is not worth anything. And this verse, 327, points that out. Prakrite kriyamana gunai karmani says. Ahamkara vimuda atma. Muda means? What does mudha mean? Come on, you're all full, right? Vimuda, when you put V in front. Especially foolish. So they're so bewildered by their so-called intelligence, big degrees, big position, big teacher, but Prabhupada said, no, you're a big cheater. So the beginning of surrendering to Krishna is to understand that this world that we're living in is a world of meshes. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur was quoted as saying that the materialistic education is a slaughterhouse because it destroys the finer sentiment of the human being. It destroys our attraction for spiritual. We become attracted to matter. So once in a class in San Diego, this is way back in the early 90s, I mentioned this point. And there was, not to pick on, you know, it's not a men versus women type of thing, but this Mataji, she went off on me. She said, how can you say that? We you know, you want them to go to Gurukula, go to ISKCON schools, and they're all bad and this and that. I didn't argue. Shortly after that, and you can look up the dates, was the very first big mass shooting, Columbine. So literally and figuratively, material education is a slaughterhouse. We know almost every week you hear somebody gets mad, goes to school, even teenagers, even in elementary school, they're getting guns somehow when they go in Asia. So we should understand this is not a place for happiness. Don't make plan after plan after plan to be happy here. It doesn't mean that we should be irresponsible. No. According to your varna and your ashram, you must act responsibly. So if you're a householder, then you have to produce. Actually, in Vedic culture, as we know, the Grihastha ashram is the only ashram that really produces. And they support everybody else, the brahmacharis, the vanaprasthas, and the sannyasis. So to be a Grihastha, a householder, is a very responsible position. I know in the beginning, ISKCON was a monastic order, practically very few women and very few householders, mostly brahmacharis. When I joined in Henry Street, there were 100 brahmacharis sleeping in a room this size, even a little smaller. There was a brownstone building, 2 brownstones together. They had been a convent, you know, where Catholic nuns were living. And so there were like 100 brahmacharis. You just had enough space to put your sleeping bag. So that was the mood back in the, you know, early mid-70s. And so amongst the brahmacharis, if one brahmachari wanted to get married, it was like, what? He's lost his mind. You know, it was like a big deal. But it's a natural progression to go from brahmacharya to grihastha to vanaprastha to sannyas. I am discussed it and spoken at length. I won't go into details here, but it's an obvious statement. Good brahmacharis make good grihastas, make good vanaprasthas, make good sannyasis. So the reason why we've had so much trouble in our society, because it's a young, we're still only 60 years old. It's not a very old society. And it's not confined to ISKCON. In every spiritual society, you find people that are not holding their vows or whatever. But it's understandable because Prabhupada wasn't starting out with brahmachari material. He was starting out with fellows like me who were joined at 21 and already spoiled rotten. Vedic culture means Komara Acharya Pragyo, Dharma Bhagavatam. Starting from age 5, you get sent to the Gurukul, and you're trained, first of all, to see every woman as mother. That's the training. So if you're not trained like that, if you join when you're in your 20s and already rotten woman chaser, what kind of brahmachari are you going to make? So it's not surprising that there were so many fall-downs. And then, to compound the problem, the leaders were saying, well, he's having trouble being a brahmachari, get him married. Does that make sense? Here's a fellow who can't uphold his brahmachari vows, and now you want to take the vow to one woman to be his wife. It's not going to happen. Very, very rare. So again, no surprise when such fallen fellows fall down again. And it's not just confined to men, the women. It was in the free love time in late 60s, early 70s. But you coming up after us, you have the opportunity to make things better and better and better. Prabhupada wanted, his Guru Maharaj wanted to reinstate proper Varna and Ashram. Proper Varna and Ashram. Because again, the proper training in each of those ashrams, and every ashram has their own responsibility. Every Varna has their own responsibility. And that's what made Vedic culture so nice, because nobody was infringing on another person. So the term Varna Shankara you've heard, starting in the second chapter, Prabhupada said, Arjuna was telling to Krishna that if the women of the family are not protected, they'll be polluted and unwanted progeny, Varna Shankara will be born. But Varna Shankara actually means someone whose Varna cannot be determined. Because they were not properly trained, the parents didn't follow proper samskars, so their Varna cannot be determined. And in Kali Yuga, that applies to just about everybody. That's why it says Kalo Shudra Sambhava. Everybody's born Shudra or less. Because if your parents didn't follow any samskars properly, and then the offspring, and we may feel like that ourselves. Someday you feel like, I would like to be the top administrator. These guys are making a mess of the world, right, ladies? Let me be the top administrator. So that's Kshatriya position. And another day you wake up and you want to be a Brahmana or a Vaishya or all of them all together. So that's Varna Shankara, somebody whose Varna cannot be determined because they were never trained. So if you want to go forward in Krishna consciousness, it means voluntarily putting yourself forward to be properly trained in proper. Now, ultimately, a Vaishnava is above Varna and Ashram, but we can't artificially put ourselves on that platform. Therefore, Prabhupada wanted a Varnashram college to be created where people can be trained properly how to be a Brahmana, how to be a Kshatriya, how to be a Vaishya. And the world is in a topsy-turvy situation because none of these world leaders were properly trained. They've taken up the mantle of leaders and they were not properly trained. So it's very, very, very important for all of you young people to submit yourself to be properly trained as Brahmana, Vaishya, Shudra, Kshatriya, whatever. Proper training is required, and that's why Prabhupada wanted to institute Varnashram College. Now, somebody who is in right consciousness, they're not bewildered, as this verse is stating here. Prakate Kriyamadani Gunaka. Ahankara. Ahankara means false ego. But real ego exists. With the sense of I am, it's real. The impersonalists, they try to decry that. No, ultimately there is no individuality. It's just one homogeneous, amorphous spiritual entity. So then explain why we feel like individuals now. Oh, well, because that portion, some portion is covered by Maya. That means Maya is stronger than the Supreme. Doesn't make any sense. If the Supreme can be covered in any degree, then that means that covering agent is stronger than the Supreme. So Prabhupada, many times you'd hear in his lectures, he's smashing the Maya bodies. One of my governors said that, we were here Prabhupada saying Maya body, this Maya, and then one day we realized that we're the Maya bodies he's talking about. Because a Maya body means, again, they think that the Supreme can be covered by Maya. Like Krishna, yes, Ram, it's okay, but it's just having a material body temporarily and then they go back to being, Brahman. No. As Krishna says in the next chapter coming up, Ajopi sana vyayatma, bhutaram eshopi sana. Prakiting swamadishay, sambhavamyatma maya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I'm the Lord of all living entities, still I advent myself millennium after millennium. So Krishna comes by his own sweet will. He's not forced to come by karma. So when I started to understand karma, then everything became clear. Why there's disparity in the family or in society in general. There are indicators of karma. What level of karma you have gotten in this life. The first one is birth. The place and family that you're born in, it's not an accident. That's based on your previous activities. But many, if not most parents, don't understand that. So as children, we used to baffle our parents when they would get on our case. We'd say, we didn't ask to be born, did we? Oh, you're right. No, you're not right. You got exactly the parents that you deserve. Born in exactly the place you deserve to be born. And none of that is by accident, as Prabhupada alludes to here in this purport. Sorry, he says, he does not know that this gross and subtle body is the creation of material nature under the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And as such, his bodily and mental activities should be engaged in the service of Krishna. So if you read Prabhupada's purports and you know the Bhagavatam, you'll see that he paraphrases a lot